Mr. Speaker and members, next bill in this order is House Bill 17. House Bill 17 by Representative Emerson to amend Title 18, provides relative to elections, party primary system of elections for certain offices, provides relative to nomination of candidates, qualification of candidates, voting, election dates, qualifying fees, compensation of Board of Election Supervisors. And Mr. Speaker and members, on behalf of the Bureau, Representative Horton sends up technical amendments to this bill.
Without objection. Representative Emerson on your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is a party primary bill. Of course, you know in the state of Louisiana right now we utilize the jungle primary system. We're the only state that uses what is actually termed the jungle primary with the way that we do it. Of course, Washington and California have some sort of situation like that where everybody goes on the ballot regardless of party, but this is a party primary system that's utilized in a lot of other states. And what we are proposing is that we have our first party primary in August of this year for congressional races, for federal races, but it'll only be our members of Congress. We have no senators up this year. And then in subsequent years, we would add statewide elected officials, other state officers like Bessie and PSC, the legislature, judges from the Supreme Court to the Court of Appeals to district judges. And I'll answer, I'm sure you have a lot of different questions about how this would work, but basically the overview is it would be, I guess, termed closed party primaries as far as the parties vote in their respective primaries. But then the individual parties would also have the decision whether or not to open it up to unaffiliated voters. And so the respective parties would notify the Secretary of State whether or not they would like for that to happen, and then that they would be open to unaffiliated voters. Of course, then those party nominees would move on to the general election. And then as far as other candidates that may want to be on the general election ballot, they would get on there by nominating petition, and then certainly everybody would vote in the November elections. Another thing to add about this, I know that if you've been here previously, I believe last term, I think Chairman Stefanski brought a bill on this, or at least had the conversation about it, about how our members of Congress kind of are at a disadvantage if they have to go into a runoff in December. And we looked into the possibility of trying to move up our jungle primary, but that was not possible and in accordance with federal law. So we would not be able to do that. And so this would allow our members of Congress to win in November and be able to take office with all the other members of Congress. Of course, it matters in seniority and staffing and just all kind of different advantages, but mostly just because it puts them there so much later and can certainly cause a disadvantage. So I'll be happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure you have a few, so let's roll.
Representative Emerson, you have an amendment. Let's go ahead and take that up now.
I do. Members, these amendments were from staff and are technical in nature.
Hold on one second.
I'm sorry.
Madam Clerk.
First set of amendments offered by Representative Emerson, set number 56 members, one-page set of amendments.
Representative Emerson on your amendment.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry for speaking out of turn earlier. These amendments are from staff and from the Bureau, I believe, and are technical in nature.
Are there any other questions? Are there any objections to the adoption of the amendment? Without objection. The next set of amendments.
Mr. Speaker and members, the next set of amendments is a one-page set offered by Representative Amy Freeman, set number 57.
Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this amendment is very simple, page 3, line 12. It just says that all parties are included in closed primaries. That's it. Nothing else. Happy to answer questions. Yes, this is only 57. Yeah, I have a second one. Yeah. You want me to clarify? Yeah, sure. Sorry. I have two amendments, and so the clerk was clarifying. Amendment number 57 says that all parties are included in closed primaries, and it's just changing the statute to read the entire statute, except for right now it's reading only C, which is 5% required for presidential primaries. So what I'm saying is if you're in the Green Party, then you can have a closed primary too. And my district has 14,925 independents. So I'm looking out for my district, and I know many of you also have high percentages of independents, so I just thought it'd be fair to give them a closed primary as well. That's it, very simple.
We have a
Happy
question.
to answer questions.
We do have a question. Representative Willard?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Rep. Freeman, is it your understanding that there are more than 800,000 voters in Louisiana who are not affiliated with the Democratic or Republican Party?
I think that's about it. 28% is the statewide number.
So is it your understanding that this amendment would make those voters not feel disenfranchised if they were blocked out of this primary system?
I mean, they would not be excluded in this case because they would also get to have a closed primary system.
So they would be able to vote and participate in that elections process that we as taxpayers are funding?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Desatel for a question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would this add any additional cost to the current elections if we did this?
Well, I can't tell you that because I did not speak to the Secretary of State's office, but I would assume because we're already having primaries, it just means that you would have to add the Green Party or the Independent Party or what the other parties and their own ballot.
So is there any, there's no fiscal note, we don't know?
I don't have one. It's just an amendment, but
Well, I mean, but if, I'm asking, does your amendment change and add a cost, additional cost?
I do not. I don't know the answer to that. I'm
So
sorry.
you
Dr.
haven't
Desson.
approached the Secretary of State and asked?
No, I have not. I just think representing 14,925 independents in District 98, I'm just attempting to give them an option to be in a closed primary.
Okay, well, thank you.
That's my main attempt,
No,
protecting my district.
I get it, but I just want to see what the cost was, and if you had talked to the Secretary of State and seen if there was
Apologies,
a
but I
cost.
have not spoken to the Secretary of State on this amendment.
Okay,
Representative Boyer?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Freeman, you just mentioned something. How many people in your district did you say?
14,925, which is 31% of my entire district is independent.
Are those registered with the independent party or are those registered with no party?
That would be a combination of independents, no party, potentially Green Party.
How many of those people are no party?
I do not know the answer to that.
Do you know how many people are no party in the state of Louisiana?
28. Oh, I don't know. It's less. It's like maybe 7% or something.
It's like $600 and something thousand dollars. 600 and something thousand people, no party. Do you realize that Representative Emerson's bill allows the Democrat Party and allows the Republican Party or any of the parties that are 5% to include this 600 and something thousand people
I do.
in the primary?
I absolutely know, but they have to decide that at their own party level. And I recall back in when we had closed primaries before that at one point the Democrats let the independents in, and at one point they didn't.
You don't think it's the right of each of the parties to be able to make that decision on who their nominee is?
I absolutely think that's the right of the party. What I'm trying to do here is give an option to the independents in my district who've asked me for their own version.
Or in this amendment, is it any party or is it only registered parties? Do you know what the amendment does on that stance?
I'd have to refer back to the full statute, and I would need staff's help on that because I think the full statute does have a reference into how something is defined as a party. So I don't.
Do you realize that someone can just write whatever their party is?
I do.
On the sheet.
I do. I have some in my district who do that.
We have some parties with 1 people in it, with 5 people in it.
I know about that because I have some constituents who.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Amade for a question. Representative Amade waves. Representative Bayham.
I don't know where he is. Oh, there he is. Trying to find people on the floor.
I think this microphone, okay, here we go. Representative Freeman, do you know how many, I'm sure you don't know the answer for this question, but do you know how many people participated in the 1972 Republican gubernatorial primary in Louisiana?
I'm sorry, but I do not know the answer to that question, but perhaps you can enlighten me.
10,571 people. So we've had close primaries for very small parties in this state. Thank you.
I see no more questions on the amendment. Representative Freeman, you have a right to close. I'm sorry, we do have a question that just popped up. Representative Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Representative Freeman, good to see you. Did you see the hearing yesterday on this bill?
I watched part of it, but I had to go to my other job, which is outside the legislature yesterday. So.
Are you aware that the executive director for the Independent Party in Louisiana came and testified against the bill?
He did not call me or contact me. This is based on constituent concerns.
No, I understand. I mean, he seemed to be speaking for all independents across the state, or at least that's what was implied, and basically wanted to make sure that independents could vote in party primaries, i.e., vote in a Republican primary or a Democratic primary. So I think there's a little bit of problem here with a consistency about what independents want to do and what they can do. So thank you.
And thank you, Representative Wright. That's why they're called independents for the most part.
Is there any objection to the adoption of the amendment? Representative Emerson, on your objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, certainly appreciate Representative Freeman, always representing her district well and her constituents. The decision was made on this, and the code that it references talks about getting 5% statewide in some election, I think in the previous 4 years or so. And I may be misquoting a little bit, but that's the general idea there. And we do have a provision for people to be on the general election ballot as independents. It was also referenced by Representative Boyer, Chairman Boyer, that there's some differences in independent and no party. There actually is an independent party in Louisiana, and then we have no party unaffiliated voters. And then if we keep going down the list, I mean, we have certain classifications of major parties, and then we have the grilled cheese party and the toga party and all these different things. So those are actual parties registered in the state of Louisiana. So the decision was made here, obviously, based on the voting patterns of the state of Louisiana being the two major parties, and then certainly having an allowance for other people who may be in other parties to join the general election by doing a nominating petition, and in the case of Congress, it would be 1,000 people. So all they would have to do is get 1,000 signatures, and so the two-party primaries that would occur certainly would go through a rigorous process of vetting through the primary system in an election. And so we thought that obviously in order to get on the general election ballot, you'd also go through somewhat of a vetting process of getting these nominating petitions and asking people in the respective districts to back you and support you as well to be on the ballot. So that's the deal. That's how they would get on the general election ballot and certainly have an opportunity to be there. And they'd have their respective parties on there. So if somebody from the grilled cheese party wanted to be on the ballot, they can go get 1,000 people in the district and they can get on the ballot. Same thing with independent, same thing with no party, same thing with any party in the state of Louisiana.
Representative Amy Freeman has a right to close. She waves. Representative Freeman set up an amendment, which Representative Emerson objects. All those in favor of the amendment, vote yea. All those opposed, vote nay. The clerk will open the machine. Representative Freeman, yes. Representative Millerine, yes? No? I can't. Representative Carver, no. Representative Marcel, yes. Representative Green, yes. Are you through voting? The clerk will close the machine. 35 yeas, 68 nays. The amendment fails to pass. The next amendment.
Mr. Speaker and members, Representative Amy Freeman offers up a second set of amendments, one-page set of amendments with the last two digits, 58.
Representative Freeman on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this amendment, again, is on behalf of my 14,925 independents. Forget about the other one, it's gone. Very different amendment. What this amendment does is that it puts a fee in place to be paid by the excluding party or parties. So, for example, if the Democrats do not let the independents into their closed primary, then they would have to pay a 28% statewide fee based on the cost of the election to the state, and that fee would then be given to the Secretary of State to perform the functions of the election.
Are there any questions on the amendment? Is there an objection to the adoption of the amendment? Representative Emerson on your objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Freeman. While I am sure the Secretary of State's office would enjoy the additional revenue, I'm not sure that we want to get into the process of punishing political parties for not allowing people not registered in their party not to vote in their party primary for their nominee.
Representative Freeman, you have a right to close on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I would just ask that it, and on behalf of the independents in District 98 and across the state, this is a fair way to deal with their exclusion from the primaries. Ask for your favorable passage.
Representative Freeman has requested an amendment which Representative Emerson has objected to. All those in favor vote yea. All those opposed vote nay. The clerk will open the machine. Representative Landry, yes. Representative Freeman, yes. Representative Larvadain, yes. Representative Marcel, yes. Representative Green, yes. Are you through voting, members? The clerk will close the machine. We have 30 yeas and 73 nays. The amendment fails. And the next amendment.
Mr. Speaker and members, Representative Newell offers up a set of amendments, number 61, one-page set of amendments.
Representative Newell on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this amendment would simply remove the judges from being included in the closed primaries. As I stated before, judicial candidates should not be elected along party lines. Judges should be insulated from the undue political pressures, whether it be from the leadership of the Democratic caucus or from the Republican Party. Restricting or subjecting judges to political pressures will remove the independence that they enjoy now as being able to freely judge according to the state statutes that we enact, or to be able to rule and judge according to the precedents of the jurisprudence that was put forth by their predecessors or their colleagues. I've experienced the lived experience of vicarious that judges who are influenced by political pressure, their rulings are often weighted by, again, their parties or the parties that ensured they got in office instead of ruling on what is right. And if we want to have our state moving forward in a positive direction, we should not place undue political pressures on our judges. We should allow them to continue to stay independent thinkers and independent doers of their craft. So I'm going to ask for your favorable passage and accept this amendment and remove the judges from closed primaries. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members.
Representative Wilford Carter, do you have a question on the amendment or the bill? Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
Representative Carter, can you wait 1 second? They got to turn you on.
Yes. Isn't it correct? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Newell, isn't it correct that most of the circuit judges, all but the Third Circuit, I think, have voted and they're against being part of this closed primary?
Well, I wouldn't say they voted, however,
They expressed.
they've expressed the fact that their thankfulness in me bringing this amendment, because as we know, judges shouldn't have opinions, but they did thank me for this
Thank you.
action, and not just the Louisiana District Judges Association, but also judges on the appellate court level as well as the Supreme Court level have thanked me for this amendment and trying to remove them from the closed primary. Any other questions?
Representative Boyer for a question?
Where are you now? There you
Representative Newell, did I hear you say that the judges in Louisiana don't vote on the merits of the case, they vote on the political party?
are. I didn't say that.
I think you may not use those words, but you said that the judges rule based on the pressures of the political party.
They should not. They should vote on the merits of the statutes that we create or the jurisprudence that was set forth by their predecessors and colleagues.
And you don't feel that the judges do that now?
You have some that don't, but you have most that do. And we would not want to put that pressure and have more that do not.
Did this amendment get brought on in committee? Or
It did not. I offered it in
presented-
committee, and my committee members did not, well, a majority of my committee members did not agree with me, so I'm going to try again.
Thank you, Representative Newell.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
No other questions.
I
Is
don't
is there an objection to the amendment? Representative Emerson, on your objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I would just ask that you leave this bill whole for right now. In this, you know, we've had a lot of debate about judges and about parties or whether or not they should be in no parties or whatever it is. And I certainly appreciate Representative Newell. We've had this debate a few times, and I appreciate her stance on things. But I would ask that you vote down this amendment.
Representative Newell, you have a right to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, we did have this conversation. And again, I'm asking that we continue to let our judges have the independence of being able to rule on the merits of the case and vote along the lines of the statutes and jurisprudence and not rule along with party pressures. And I believe removing them from closed primaries would allow them to keep their independence. So I'm going to ask for your acceptance in favor of passage of this amendment.
Representative Newell has offered up an amendment. Representative Emerson has objected. All those in favor vote yea. All those opposed vote nay. The clerk will open the machine. Representative Mandy Landry, yes. Are you through voting, members? The clerk will close the machine. We have 37 yeas and 67 nays. The amendment fails to pass. The next amendment.
Next amendment, Mr. Speaker and members, is a one-page set offered by Representative Wilford Carter, set number 59.
Representative Carter, on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I can count, but sometimes you have to do things to make a record. And so please accommodate me on at least hearing this amendment out. I have 4 problems with the closed primary. Number 1, it favors the 2 principal parties, Republican and Democrat, which I'm a Democrat. So it favors the principal parties. And if you have a closed primary, if they don't let independents and non-party people run, or independents run, then the campaign will get started. They have a firm lead, and more than likely, the prominent parties will control the election. I have 24% independents in my district. I'm a veteran. We got at least 100,000 veterans that vote independent in this state. So as a veteran, I don't think we should disenfranchise them. I think Another problem with this closed primary, it does, I think, disenfranchise independents and no party. And so I think that's going to create a 14th Amendment issue, equal protection clause issue. And I know how they resolve in other states, South Carolina and these states, but I think if this passes in the form it's in now, it'd be subject to litigation because it may offend the equal protection clause of the 14th Amendment. Because you're not giving, you're treating the independents and the no party people different. You're requiring them to go take a petition, select a petition, and submit it to the registrar of voters in order to run in the general election. By the time the general election comes around, the impetus and of the election is going to be pretty much over with. The cost is going to be a lot more. And so that's why I bring this amendment. Based what this amendment does, this comes up at the time we debating legislation on creating another congressional district, minority district. And it's kind of like, seemed like it's kind of tied in to me. And so we want to, this amendment just simply limits this legislation to Congress. So it only applied to Congress election, congressional election. And number two, it addresses another problem I have. In a party primary system, a person get elected to a position with less than 50% of the vote of the electorate, okay? And so it's just a simple plurality. So this will require a majority. So if you have number one, it only applied to congressmen. Number two, that whoever gets elected, you have a primary system, you go to a general election, and then if that person don't get a majority, or 50 plus one, then you have to have a runoff election, the top two. Basically what I'm talking about, because you can have a non-party run in a general election. They get a petition to run the general election, and the person gets elected, may get elected, but only 40% of the electorate support. I think that's a problem, and that's why I offer this amendment. Any question?
Are there any questions to the amendment? Are there any objections to the amendment? Representative Emerson, on your objection.
No, just on the general, not on the primary, just on the general.
All right, sorry for that delay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I certainly understand what Representative Carter is trying to do here. I respect that. My issue is that it kind of goes back to our original problem on Congress, is they wouldn't get elected until December, because we'd have the general election, and then we'd end up in the same situation as the state of Georgia, where we'd have to go into a runoff election. It would cause another election, and our members of Congress still wouldn't get there until December. So that's what I'm going to have to object.
Representative Stagney, do you have a question for Representative Emerson?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chairman Emerson, so I think the judge raises a really good issue so far as I think there's a ballot issue, access issue in your bill that does not protect everyone. Republicans and Democrats can get on by nominating petition or paying the qualifying fee. And you have a higher hurdle for independents, non-party, and all other parties. They cannot get on the ballot by just paying a qualifying fee. You don't believe that's inherently wrong?
So I believe that whenever the other parties have gone through a party primary process and actually had to run, I think it's quite a strenuous process in that circumstance. So we were trying to actually make it fair as far as the independents and anybody else who wanted to get on. Any other party that wanted to go on the general election ballot, they would also have to go through some type of process as well, because they did not go through the party primary process.
But they would have access to the ballot in some other states just by paying a qualifying fee, just like the Republicans and Democrats, correct?
Well, I will tell you, Representative Stagney, in my research on other states on doing this bill, there's a lot of different possibilities, and we could run through a lot of scenarios there.
But you don't think that's inherently wrong, forcing those who are not part of a recognized party under our statute to have to go
Representative
get
Stagney,
signatures from...
I try not to do things that are inherently wrong, so.
Okay. So in 2008, we did something similar, and I've spoken to Representative Glenn Ansardi, who predates me in this spot, and Representative Wilmot. It was a bill by Senator Cleo Fields at the time in 2006. It took 2 years to set up a closed primary for Congress, and it took that long to set up, I think they might have had 2 election cycles, and there was such voter outcry because of voter confusion and voter costs that with well over 70 votes, 71 votes, they scrapped the whole primary. What has happened, and the argument back then was, oh, we're not going to seat our congressman till so many days later. But that's only if everybody comes in at the same time. I mean, a lot of people are still there. It happens only in an open seat with other people in other states. What's broken about the system now that we would want to bring this right now?
Well, and that was kind of a long question, but thank you for the
sorry.
question. There was a lot to it, but look, I think that we have an opportune time right now to do this. We are obviously talking about a lot of different election processes, and we've talked about this before. There was a task force on party primaries. I believe this was started a couple of years ago.
2021.
Thank you. So, yeah, there you go, 2021. Chairwoman Hewitt, who chairs Senate Governmental, brought a bill last year. There's been some debate and discussion on it. I realize that was a different legislature. This is a new one. But this topic, contrary to some belief, actually has been debated in this building a few times. So, your question of necessarily what's changed, I mean, look, I think the last time we had party primaries, I think I was in college. So I wasn't quite the student of the political process at that point. I was trying to make you smile a little bit, but I wasn't quite as astute in the political process at that point as I am now. So I did not follow it as closely as I follow things now. So I can't really tell you what went right or went wrong. I know change is difficult anytime you change things. So I can certainly attest it to that, and I also believe that we have to equip the Secretary of State's office with some funding to help educate the voters, but also it's the candidates who run for office can do a lot of educating as well. I mean, they're the ones who spend a lot of money. As you know, we send out mail and all kind of stuff to tell people when Election Day is and help them through the process. So I think it's also going to be incumbent upon them as well.
And I did see the hearing yesterday, and I saw Secretary of State Landry looked a little apprehensive about the time frame of trying to get this in order. And last time it took 2 years, and I'm worried that she's going to be extremely rushed. But I'll have some other comments when we're on the bill. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Representative Ilg, is your question on the amendment or the bill?
I'm sorry, it's on the bill. I'll wait.
Representative Carter, you have the right to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, one of I understand, Madam Chairperson, is against the amendment because it would cause our Congress people to be seated later, because we may have to have a runoff election after the first general in order to get someone that have a majority support of the voters. Right now, on the present structure, that happens sometime. Our congressmen may not be seated until after other congressmen in the countries are seated. So we got that problem right now because we do require a majority. Now, we changed them from a majority to a plurality. And so another concern I have about this legislation is that it can result, it may not be intended to result, it can result in the lone Democratic congressman, the only African-American congressman out of 6, not to do away with his district. They have almost an impossible chance of winning his district, simply because it's not requiring a majority. So you can run a Republican. You got first to reduce the district. It's going to probably be reduced from what 61% of voting age population black now to something around 53%. The numbers I've been seeing in the other bills, congressional bills, to 54%. So you're going to have a congressman that's going to be having opposition from the Republican side or the independent side, and it's going to cost a lot more money to run for Congress, okay, more election, and then that person may end up representing a district that's, say, 53% black with 42% of the vote. So all the districts, any congressman can get elected under this bill with less than a majority of the vote. So that's why I offer this amendment. We're trying to make a record. I think in the end, we may be doing something we're not intending on doing, and zeroing out an opportunity for black congressmen to be elected, making it very difficult, almost impossible for them to get elected. And so if that does have the effect of doing that would be challenged, and this would be held up. So we really trying to, we understand what we're trying to do, and I don't like closed primary at all, but I can live with it. But I think we really, this being done, the Congress folks, most of them probably support a closed primary. So I'm just thinking we need to maybe pass this amendment, actually pass this amendment would help going a long way in resolving the issue and not encourage litigation. Thank you.
Representative Wilford Carter has offered up an amendment which Representative Emerson has opposed. All in favor vote yes. All opposed vote no. The clerk will open the machine. Representative Carter, yes. Representative Landry, yes. McMakin, no. Representative Edmonds? Edmund Jordan, yes. Are you through voting, members? The clerk will close the machine. We have 30 yeas, 73 nays, and the amendment fails to pass. The next amendment.
Mr. Speaker and members, next set of amendments is a one-page set offered by Representative Jordan, set number 53.
Representative Jordan on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, look, last term for those of you who may not know, I had an opportunity and the honor and privilege to serve as the chair of the House Executive Committee. And with that, we had an opportunity, an obligation to look out for the good of the body. So when I have an opportunity to do something for the good of the body, I certainly try to do that. And so I think from Representative Stagney, I think you hit it with Representative Carter, you hit it right on the head. This is confusing. And so I'm not sure exactly from a fundraising standpoint or from an election cycle, what is it that we're going to be able to do? What's going to change and what's going to stay the same? So all this bill really does is it allows for the Supervisory Committee on Campaign Finance Disclosure, which is ethics, so it's a long way of saying that, to have a $10 fee for the purpose of educating us on what those changes mean. And that's simply all it does. I'd rather give them $10 on the front end than them to come and try to find me and get $100 or $1,000 a day or whatever it is for an ethics violation on the back end. This is going to be very confusing to us. Those of you that have run this last election cycle, if you had opposition and you had to file all these reports, it can be very tedious, it can be very demanding. With this new closed primary, I'm not sure if that creates another cycle for us for when we can raise money, or does it change the rates of how much we can raise? And certainly I don't want anybody to be in violation. So all this does is give them a slight fee on the front end for the purpose of educating us to make sure that we know what the rules are when this passes so that we all know that we would be in compliance. That's all it is, nothing more, nothing less, and I'll entertain any questions.
Is there any objection? President Emerson on your objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I certainly do appreciate Representative Jordan and his concern. Unfortunately, when you do add fees like this to bills, it makes it a 2/3 vote, and so I believe that it might be for that reason, but I don't know. So he can reply to that. So I'd ask you to please object to the amendment or vote down the amendment.
To Representative Emerson's question, I'm not sure what it does as it relates to that, but what I will say is this. This is something that we all need, and I don't know anybody who doesn't want to be educated and be in compliance with ethics because, again, when it comes to you and when they send you that letter, I've never received one from them, fortunately, but I do know those that have. And then when they send you those letters and they start telling you about how much you have to pay per day, this $10 will seem like a minuscule amount compared to that. So I would certainly ask for your favorable passage.
Representative Jordan has offered up an amendment which Representative Emerson opposes. All those in favor vote yea. All those opposed vote no. The clerk will open the machine. Mellorin, no. Boyer, no. Guyman, no. Wright, no. Z, no. Are you through voting, members? The clerk will close the machine. We have 32 yeas and 72 nays. The amendment fails to pass. Next amendment.
Next set of amendments is a one-page set offered by Representative Jackson, set number 60.
Representative Jackson, on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, members. I hate that this would be my first time coming before this body, but on such an occasion. But I come today to offer up this amendment that would basically require a majority vote for a candidate to win. My concern is the plurality to win. All of us were on the ballot. Some were fortunate. A lot were fortunate to run unopposed, but if you were on the ballot, many were on the ballot, and you might have come in second place. You probably fell a little bit short. You would not have won if this process was in place, because it only required a plurality to win as opposed to a majority vote. We could have a scenario where you have ideally 3 candidates and somebody can get less than the 50+1 threshold and be declared the winner. You could have a scenario where a candidate could have more votes against them than for them and still be declared the winner. And that should be problematic for all of us, particularly those that have been faced with that situation before. So I'm asking us to adopt this amendment. It's about parity, and I'm also, this amendment also sets the effective date at January 2025 for all of the elections involved in this, January 2025. It is only fair that we give our registrar of voters, we give our clerks of court, we give all individuals, the Secretary of State, all individuals that have to put processes in place to have an efficient election, the opportunity to get prepared. And I believe Representative Stagney a moment ago talk about the 2 years previously. Technology might have advanced some things, but with this, we have literally less than 6 or 7 months to get a process in place. And that's going to put a lot of strain on those election officials who we look for to have integrity in our elections, make sure that we have confidence in our elections to be able to run them smoothly. And so I think that a January 2025 effective date would be fair. So I'm open for any questions.
Are there any questions? Is there any objections? Representative Emerson, on your objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members, and thank you, Representative Jackson. Certainly understand the substance of your amendment. And there can certainly be a lot of debate on plurality versus majority vote. Both kind of involve different strategies and can have different outcomes. And I think, both are certainly worth discussing. In an attempt to institute the bill this year for the effective date of August 2024 for the congressional primaries, we felt that plurality was probably what needed to be done at this time, because obviously it would negate the need for an additional election for a runoff, and also the timeline just worked out better. So I'm just going to have to object to this amendment for that reason.
Representative Hilferty for a question. Representative Emerson, you have a question on the objection.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess, Chairwoman Emerson, my question is, I understand there's a timing component, but what is the benefit of plurality versus majority?
I don't know if it's benefit or not. It's, again, like I said, it's just different strategies. I mean, I've been involved in elections that they have both, and it's just different way of doing things, just like the jungle primary is. I mean, every election process has a different strategy and different potential outcomes. So I don't know about benefits other than it does not trigger an additional election afterwards.
Thank you.
I feel like you have another question. You're thinking about it.
Representative Jackson, you have the right to close.
Yes, again, I just think that, one, the plurality issue can cause harm. It can put a lot of folks at a disadvantage. Again, a lot of us were on the ballot this past fall, or this past fall that just passed, and that plurality could have tripped you up. The benefit of plurality versus majority is the majority of the voters will have put confidence and signed their stamp and seal of confidence in you. And so I just think that gives that opportunity to have that 50+1. I feel good about coming down here knowing that, saying that I had the majority of my district. We all talk about representing our district. The majority of my district, the majority of your districts gave you their stamp of approval to come down. Not 15%, not 10%, not 30%, not 40%, but 50+. The majority of your district gave you the stamp of approval to come down and speak with authority to them. Again, I don't know that the issue of timeliness was addressed as well in the objection, but we rely on our chief election officers back at home, which are our clerk of courts, our registrar of voters, our police juries, a commission where I'm at. A lot of those folks have recently gone through precinct. They've had to go do precinct consolidations. And so folks are going to be voting in different precincts. There's a lot of things that have taken place because this was recently a redistricting, reapportionment year. And so it could cause chaos in the election system by doing this year. And so I'm just asking for us to have some time. We talked about Dr. King here on Monday, and I heard the Speaker Pro Tem talk about cowardice, but Dr. King said that vanity calls us to do what's popular, expedience calls us to do what's fair, but there comes a time when we should not do what's vanity or popular. We should do what's right, and I think the right thing to do is to have individuals elected here by a 50+ majority, 51+ majority, and give the folks who we task to have safe and fair elections an opportunity to prepare and execute those elections. With that, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Jackson has offered up an amendment which Representative Emerson opposed. All those in favor vote yea. All those opposed vote no. The clerk will open the machine. Representative Newell, yes. Representative Zarang, no. Representative Jordan, yes. Representative Wright, no. Members, are you through voting? Clerk will close the machine. We have 31 yeas, 71 nays, and the amendment fails to pass. Next amendment.
Next set of amendments is one-page set offered by Representative Mandy Landry, last two digits, 63.
Representative Landry, on your amendment.
Good afternoon. This is all for one for all. If we are in a party primary, if statewide are, then the rest of the constitutional offices should be too. And those are, I'm sure they're happy to be listed, the sheriff, the assessor, the clerk of court, the coroner, and the DA. Just make it fair. That's it.
Are there any questions on the amendment? Is there any objection? Representative Emerson, on your objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Landry. Certainly understand the reasoning here. As we were putting together this bill, there were some logistical issues. I think someone mentioned maybe some home rule charter issues, but it was ultimately decided to not deal with the locals right now. But certainly, if you'd like to bring a bill in the future to address that, I'm sure the body would love to debate it.
Representative Landry, you have the right to close.
I mean, these aren't locals in the sense, we understand this, there's no mayor, there's no parish council. These are in our Constitution. While I might only vote on sheriff in Orleans Parish and not Jefferson, these are constitutionally provided offices, and that's why they have to come to us every time they want a pay raise or anything else that they want. Now, if this bill was just for Congress, I think the conversation and the voting would be a little bit different, but it includes us. It includes, is it just us? Your bill? Anyway, it doesn't include these other 5 offices that are in the Constitution. I think this is the only fair way to do it, frankly. I mean, including some and not including others, as multiple people in here have said, leads to even greater confusion. If you just do Congress and you have it on the presidential primary, I think people can understand that. But having my sheriff and my DA at one time, and then having my mayor at another time, although some people do it on off years, I think leads to greater confusion. Not to mention, this whole thing is going to lead to greater confusion. So I like this amendment, and I hope you will agree that it's fair to everyone in the state constitution.
Representative Desautel, she's on her close. Rep. Landry, will you take a question on your closing? Representative Desautel?
Sorry about the late question, Representative Landry. Does this change the timing any? So I think all of this was going to start in August. I mean, does your amendment change any of the timing?
No.
So we would be asking our Secretary of State to implement all of these changes for this fall.
That's what we're already asking in the bill.
Well, just for the ones that...
Well, for when it goes
Congression.
into effect, which is next spring?
Congress, 2024.
It would be, yeah, a year from now, which would give them a year to, the rest of the year to finalize all the details, the same as they're going to have to for Congress and any other races.
All right, thank you.
It would add to the burden that we are already adding to.
Right, I was just thinking if you were going to do this, you could have maybe moved it to 25 or 26, which would have gave them more time, and
Well, if it passes, we can amend it again.
thank you.
Representative Landry, Representative Willard has a question on the amendment. Are you willing to take his question?
Yes.
Just to try to help clarify that, is it your understanding that this bill affects Congress this year and everything else next year?
Now it is my understanding. Thank you.
Thank you.
He asked if it affects only Congress this year and everyone else next year. Yes.
Representative Mandy Landry has offered up an amendment which Representative Emerson has opposed. All those in favor vote yea. All those opposed vote no. The clerk will open the machine. Mandy Landry, yea. Representative Emerson, nay. Members, are you through voting? Members, are you through voting? The clerk will close the machine. We have 33 yeas, 69 nays, and the amendment fails to pass. Are there any other amendments?
No additional members at the desk, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, back on the bill. Representative Phelps for the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thought it was worthy to mention that 2 of the leaders and retired leaders from North Louisiana, beginning with Senator Cassidy, was opposing of this bill. And I'm sure you saw his comments. And I think all of you got letters from retired Senator Robert Adley. And I just wanted to point out a few things in the letter that he stated. As a Republican and one who served in the House for 16 years, in the Senate for 13 years, in the governor's office for 4, I will provide some history regarding closed primaries and make several points. Closed primaries will disenchant voters. Other states do have open primaries, and spending over $90 million, I'm not sure if that is accurate, to have closed primaries could have better be used in the public interest. He also adds that independents are growing in number much faster than Republicans or Democrats. Hence, closing primaries will disenfranchise almost 900,000 independent voters. Closed primaries will remove their right to vote and alienate these voters. This is absolutely the wrong thing to do. He further states that finally, I am told that the cost of these closed primaries as a past chairman of the House Appropriations Committee and chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee, I know that that money could be spent on things much better benefit the public rather than spending this amount of money on which alienates voters and is really based on self-serving party politics. For all of the reasons above, the legislature should not close primaries. I thank you for your time and appreciate your careful consideration of this matter before creating closed primaries in Louisiana, as this will take a huge step backwards rather than a move forward. Thank you.
Representative Phelps, can you hold 1 second? Representative Willard, I see you have a question. Is it for Representative Phelps? Okay. Okay, thank you. For the floor on the bill, Representative Desatel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we elected a new governor this year, and we elected him overwhelmingly. We tasked him, the people of Louisiana tasked Governor Jeff Landry, to take our state from last and bring it to first. We tasked him and asked him to keep our kids here at home. We asked him to be able to educate our kids better. We have a lot of asks for the governor. He came here, stood at this podium, and said one of the ways he wants to do that is with these party primaries. You may not agree with every little nuance of the bill, but I'll tell you this, being the CEO of a company, if you're going to task me with changing the culture, changing the company, putting us in the right direction, and I tell you this is one of the things I need to do that, I'm going to support you. So I hope you support this bill. Thank you.
Okay, Representative Emerson on your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I will take questions because I know people still have some questions. But, am I closing now?
No.
Okay, then we're going to take questions.
Representative Willard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Rep. Emerson, I appreciate you taking questions on this. So the first thing that I wanted to get into was the cost. And I know some of this was discussed in H&GA and in appropriations, but do you know how much it will cost for us year after year to operate in a closed primary system?
So, Representative Willard, I don't know if there was a new fiscal note that was added a little bit earlier this morning. Did you see that?
I have not, no.
Okay, all right, no problem. I'll explain that. So,
Thank you.
as you all know, in this fiscal year that we passed earlier, Representative Chairman McFarland had a supplemental bill to cover the cost for a couple of different things. Number one, we obviously have a bill that has a constitutional amendment that's going on this session right now. So if we have that, we'll have to cover the cost of the statewide election that I believe would occur in April. So that's part of what that supplemental bill included. It also includes some additional dollars for the Secretary of State's office to be able to prepare for this August party primary. Moving forward, my understanding from the office, and this it's more detailed in this fiscal note that's probably on your computer. They need roughly $7 to $8 million to conduct a statewide election. So that's what that would be. There's been a lot of discussion, and Secretary Landry and Ms. Hadsky, the Commissioner of Elections, testified in committee that Louisiana certainly does have more elections than most states. So I think the desire, and obviously it's not what this bill is doing, but I think the desire moving forward would certainly be to try to look into how we could minimize the amount of elections in this state. And so hopefully we can look at that in the future and try to reduce some cost. I do understand and acknowledge that, in the beginning, we would certainly have this party primary to pay for. And, I certainly will work with Chairman McFarland to be able to fund the offices that they need.
So if this bill were to pass, my understanding is that we are constitutionally required to fund elections, right?
Certainly.
So if this bill passes, taking it in isolation, are we looking at an additional $7-8 million a year in election expenses?
Potentially, because we said $7 to $8 million is what it costs for a statewide election. But like I said, we certainly would look to help them because we have the power to help them do that, to reduce the amount of elections that we have.
I understand. I'm just trying to deal with, I guess, what's in front of me right
Sure.
now. So that would be an additional $7-8 million per year. And I think in JLCB today, the forecast that was presented is showing a deficit occurring in FY 25-26. So how would this play into that? And do you think this is a wise allocation of recurring dollars? Because that's what we'll really be talking about after this initial funding stream.
Sure, and Representative Willard, certainly we make the decisions here of what we pass and what we don't. And as you said, we have to fund elections. So if we pass a bill for this election, then we're required to fund it. Obviously we'll be having lots of discussions in the upcoming fiscal years about our budget, as we certainly do every single year in this place, and always looking for ways to be more efficient in all parts of government. And I assume in our elections and every single agency and department that we have, we'll be looking for ways to do that. So I understand your question. I understand what you're saying, and obviously we have a fiscal note on this, but certainly we'll be dealing with that in the budget moving forward.
Okay. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is the way that we're treating the voters as well as candidates that are not a Democrat or a Republican. And I'm asking you this because I know you've kind of looked at what other states are doing, correct? Mm-hmm. So my question is, how is it requiring non-Democratic or Republican candidates to get, petitions signed from members of that same party in order for them to run? How is that not discriminatory when Republicans and Democrats just go down to the clerk's office and pay their fee, and now they're on the ballot?
Well, again, like I talked about before, if we're going to have this party primary system, obviously those two parties would have a situation where they would have to go through a process to have a nominee. That requires the candidate to pay the qualifying fee, to run, to campaign, and to get voters in their party to go support them and vote for them. The reason the decision was made as far as the other party candidates and getting on the ballot in the general is because they essentially skipped that party nomination election. So all we're asking them to do is get 1,000 people to agree that they should also be on the ballot. A lot of states actually require nomination process and signatures. So that's not something that's totally unusual. That's not done in some other states. Well, so that's the decision that was made.
I get that. I guess my question is specifically because for Republican and Democrats, you don't need the signatures. You just pay. But then for these other party candidates, they would have to get the signatures. So it just seems it's two different policies.
Yeah, so they pay, and then they have to go through a party primary, and they have to go through an election.
Okay. And then this
they could get the signatures if they wanted to. It's still an option.
Right. So then, this is the last thing that I just wanted to touch on. And I know, look, I was of the understanding that we came into this special really because we were required by a judge to put forward a map that had 2 majority-minority congressional districts that would perform. And so I have a concern in your legislation right now with it calling for an August primary this year that it could potentially, let's say, we pass a map with 2 majority-minority districts, the governor signs it into law. Do you foresee a situation where maybe the Secretary of State's office says, well, I don't have time to get things ready for a June qualifying period for these congressional races, and it's sort of used as a reason, as an out, to stick with the current map for the next 2 years?
That's an interesting assertion, Representative Willard.
It's not an assertion,
but no,
it's just a thought, and I'm
that's-
asking what you think about it.
I don't really have any thoughts about it because that's absolutely never come up in conversation.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm looking at the numbers. I think that the Secretary of State's office was saying that they needed this information by a certain timeline for the current election schedule. And so if this were to pass, that election schedule moves up to August. And so if they were saying they need it by this date for an October primary, if it moves up to August, so I'm concerned, my concern is that we come in here, we do all this hard work, we work together, we comply with the judge's order, we walk away, we got a map with 2 majority-minority districts, and then it's like, well, we actually don't have time to have that set up for this election cycle, so you have to wait until 26. That's my concern. I guess we can talk more about it offline, but I appreciate you answering my questions.
Well, and I appreciate your concern on that. I can tell you that is certainly not my intention, Representative Willard. This was included in the call.
I don't think it is, and I hope you didn't take it that way.
No,
That's not-
hey, you're my friend, no problem. No, that is not my intention whatsoever with this. This was included in the call. I brought this bill to discuss a party primary process that has been discussed in this building many times, and I think it's time.
Yeah, I just have a concern that that may occur, but I appreciate you answering my questions. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Representative Boyd for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
In my district, I have many conversations with my Republican constituents in that area. Do you believe that this bill would kind of discourage bipartisan conversation in legislation?
For unaffiliated voters, you mean? Is that what you're saying? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that exact question.
In my district, I have a lot of Republicans who actually seek out
Republicans, okay.
conversation with me.
I understand.
Do you believe that this closed primary would discourage bipartisan conversation in legislation?
I mean, that's not my personal opinion. I think obviously in every district, Republicans, Democrats, they'll be able to run in their party primaries. And then I think whoever wins the general election, I would hope that everyone, regardless of party in the district, would want to converse with their representative, their senator, whoever. I mean, my senator and I are from different parties, and we certainly converse all the time.
Yeah, now you do, but with this particular bill in place, it seems like this would further divide Louisiana versus bringing us all together.
That's not my intention, and I would hope not. I would certainly, I think you do have really great dialogue with every single person who's in your district, and I certainly applaud you for that, and I don't think this bill is going to change that.
Another thing, in my particular district, what I heard from constituents were insurance issues, their concern with education and health care, not really closed or open primaries. What made you bring this bill?
So those issues, I agree, are all major issues for the state of Louisiana, and I believe we're going to address the crime issue coming up in a different session. That will be in the call. And certainly, I would like to address a lot of those other issues in the general. This topic was included in the call for this session, and I brought this bill.
I know it was included in the call. I'm just trying to figure where it came from all of a sudden. This has never been, at least in my particular district, on anyone's radar.
So Again, like I've said, it is something that has been discussed in this body, and I think we all bring different types of legislation that some are brought from our constituents, and some are just issues that we recognize ourselves. So we decided to bring this bill in for debate. I think it's been debated here several times. Obviously hasn't passed, and decided to bring it this time for another debate.
Right. Would you think that it hadn't passed because the constituents in Louisiana are not for it?
Well, this is the first time it's been brought in this legislature. So it's been brought in previous legislatures, and obviously at that point, those legislators didn't feel they wanted to pass it. So I'm offering it to this one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Echols?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Emerson, a couple of questions as it relates to House and Senate primaries. Based on the way I understand this bill, we will be caucusing or primarying during the March month. Is that an accurate assessment?
So as the bill currently stands right now, there is a call for party primaries in March, yes.
Okay.
If for subsequent elections, obviously not this year.
Sure. So looking forward, we've worked really hard as a Republican delegation, and really anybody for that matter, to grow our party, to grow opportunities, to grow conservatism in the state of Louisiana. If we have an endeavor where we're running for re-election and we're having to primary while we're potentially in a legislative session, which also has prohibitions against fundraising during those sessions, how do we solve that problem?
Yeah, so I appreciate that question, Representative Echols, and we did talk about this a little bit earlier, and I would certainly be amenable to discussing that issue in upcoming sessions. If you wanted to bring some type of amendment on the bill, I totally understand that. The bill, we're trying to make it as concise as possible, because getting into campaign finance certainly brings up a lot more sections of law here. So a couple of different issues on that. So, as we've stated, it would be a March primary. So certainly in that regard, it would be the very beginning of the session. And so obviously we would have been raising money up to that point, just from like a reality standpoint. But I'm certainly willing to look at that. And I would also kind of point you to, and I realize we are in the state legislature and we come to Baton Rouge, but I would also point you to our members of Congress who, most members of Congress around the country have party primaries. And I do realize there are certain parts of their calendar where they do come home and maybe have more time. But they're full-time members of Congress, and so they're going up there always, and they are having the campaign. And I think if you talk to any of our members of Congress, they would tell you that they certainly feel like the constituent work that they do and the votes that they make is part of their record and what draws constituents to still vote for them. So I understand the heartburn over that issue, and I'm absolutely willing to address it in the future with you, or even if you wanted to try to address it, in the very near future.
Well, I guess my concern and what I'm asking for is a commitment that, Congress can raise money all year long, as I understand it. We as a state legislature, while we're in session, are unable to raise money. If we're having to caucus and primary against another Republican or another Democrat, and we're unable to raise money and we're unable to be home, some of us live 3, 4, 5 hours away, it creates a very large obstacle. And I want to ensure we can continue to protect the gains that we've made as individuals, and we're not disabled as individual representatives from being successful going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And you certainly have my commitment on that. I would support any type of law change or legislation that would certainly still make it fair for legislators who would have a primary earlier. Absolutely.
Thank you for that commitment.
Yep, thank you.
Representative Shammerhorn for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ms. Chairwoman, I've heard the number of $80 and $90 million, what this is going to cost.
80 and 90 million?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
Yes.
that is not in this fiscal note, so I'm not really sure where that came from.
Well, I don't either, but anyway, that's what I've heard. Look,
I hear a lot of things around here.
Yeah. In essence, what this is actually going to cost above what it normally would cost is for the one primary election.
So-
is from what I understand.
Yeah, if certainly I would point you, and I made this comment to Representative Willard, but to everyone again, there was an initial fiscal note talking about an increase that had some explanations, and then they worked a little bit more on it, and today updated the fiscal note. And like I discussed previously, we would certainly like to do our best to look at how many elections we have, because it was said in committee that we do have probably an abnormal amount of elections compared to other states. So it is something that we would certainly look at in the future in an attempt to, I guess, kind of offset this. But certainly I understand having an additional party primary election this year is going to cost another statewide election. So about $7 to $8 million, it says on this fiscal note.
Yes, and
Yep.
and we cover all the elections anyway. Okay, so moving forward, every state election, I think what they have done is included every state election for the next 10 years. Is what they've looked
yeah.
at to try to get to that $80 to $1 million, $80 to $90 million figure.
Yeah, well, over the next 10 years, I'm sure there's quite a lot of things that we'll spend $80 to $90 million on, but I don't think it's going to be this.
Right, exactly. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Ilg for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Emerson. I voiced my concern yesterday from my clerk of court in Jefferson Parish. He is opposed to this, and he has stated that he has a hard enough time getting commissioners now, much less having to have possible added elections. How are we looking to combat that?
So my understanding, and I know the Secretary of State's office has certainly raised this issue as far as commissioner pay, and that is something that we have committed to looking at addressing. And I know that Chairman McFarland is aware, and as well as the Speaker, that has been an issue, and even before we were talking about this. So we certainly will be looking at that.
Bless you. 32% of my district is no party or independent. I heard you state earlier that you would have to gather 1,000 signatures if you're an independent or no party and would that only be signatures of voters that are also independent or no party?
And I believe that statute says in the district.
Is that legally, can we impose different standards for different voters and constituents?
So again, since we are changing the process and how it works, and the party primary system is going to go through an election and a rigorous vetting in that system, and they can also get the petitions to be on the ballot in the party primary, or they can pay the qualifying fee. The decision was made on the independents, and well, not just the independents, anybody else who wants to be on the ballot in the general election, to have the nominating process so that there was a similar type of vetting to ensure fairness to the people who also had to go through the party primary.
Okay. I've just got some concerns because of my clerk and because last question. I stepped out early. I don't know if you answered this. Back in 2006, they did a closed primary also, and in 2010 it was repealed. What's the difference between that bill and this one?
Well, Representative Ilg, look, I appreciate that question, and I'm certainly not continuously trying to promote my youth here, but I was in college then, so I was not following the legislature and the political process quite as closely. But I believe, from my understanding, it was a congressional party primary, much like this one that we're doing this year. But as far as the intricacies and the ins and outs, I'm sorry, I can't tell you all of them, but I believe it would have been similar.
I just worry about it confusing the voters where some races are open, some races are closed. And Representative Landry had a bill earlier to put everybody in to kind of solve that, but an amendment in earlier. But I'm worried about the confusion. My clerk said it was confusing to him. It was confusing to educate the commissioners and getting them to lock out certain machines. I want to make sure that it's done in a fair way where it does not perceived as us trying to keep anybody from voting. But I appreciate you bringing the bill, and I know you've put a lot of hard work into it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate those questions. And I would just say, look, as far as keeping people from voting, every single person can vote in a general election. They always have, they can in this. I mean, it's a general election situation where all the voters will be voting. We are talking about a party primary process where the individual parties and the members of those parties are choosing their nominee to go on the general election ballot that everyone votes in.
Right, I get that. A lot of us have, 828,000 no party independents. A lot of those voters, constituents, are some of our supporters, so I just don't want to leave them out. I've had a number of concerns and calls from people that are independent wanting to make sure they're not going to be left out. And from what I see in here, the state party could leave you out with 90 days notice. Is that correct?
The state parties can choose whether or not unaffiliated voters vote in their party primary process. That is correct.
So one party could say yes and one party could say no.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Thomas for a question.
Somebody's got to fix that. Madam Chair,
Representative Thomas.
I would like to have a little clarification on the $1,000, I mean the 1,000 signatures in order to qualify. Because that only applies to certain positions. Is that correct?
So that's for Congress, and then there's different levels as you go. So this year, it would be Congress, so it would be 1,000.
So only Congress, okay?
Yes.
But right now, our law is that a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, a no party could get, if they wanted to run for state representative, which of course is not this year, I believe it's in the neighborhood of 400 signatures.
That's correct.
On a petition, and they would not have to pay a qualifying fee. So that is correct, is it not?
That's correct.
And I believe it's about 500 for senators.
I believe that's generally correct.
So
yes.
that is current law, is it not?
It is.
So that could happen.
It could.
Thank you.
Representative Stagney for a question.
Just another quick bite at the apple. But under the current law, everybody's treated equally. Everybody has the opportunity to either do a nominating petition or pay the qualifying fee. Under this bill, anybody other than Republican and Democrats, they don't have that opportunity. The only opportunity they have is to go do a nominating petition among people of like party with them. Is that correct?
So it's correct that if you want to be on the general election ballot and you have not gone through the vetting process of a party primary, that you would have to get the 1,000 signatures to be on the general election ballot, yes.
Okay. Second point I wanted to make, you just said that in a general election, the voter can vote if they want to, but they can't vote for whoever they want to. Under the current system,
They can vote for whoever's on the ballot, yeah.
We've all fought for the right to choose your own doctor. We fought for the right for choice in education. But yet, the voter cannot vote for whoever wants to run for that office.
I disagree with you on that.
Well, they're going to be restricted to the choice of whatever the party came up with.
Well, Representative Stagney, I think that oftentimes when you have members of different organizations and groups and whatever, I mean, they are the voting members of that group and organization. So, yeah, they choose their nominee of who they want to be on the ballot.
The party does, right?
The people registered in that party.
In that party.
The voters registered in that party.
But people ought to have the opportunity to vote for whomever they want.
I'm not sure.
That just seems inherently fair that if these people want to qualify for an office as a candidate, I, as a voter, regardless of party, should have that opportunity to vote for who I want to vote for.
I agree.
Not be restricted by some other type of process. Now, I want to move on because we know we disagree.
Right. We can agree or disagree on that one.
I want to give you kudos because one of the things you did in this bill that they didn't do back in 2006, you knew that if it was a majority vote, that would jack the finances through the roof. It would cost so much money. So you tried the best you could to keep the same amount of elections, didn't you?
I mean, I did my best on a lot of things on this bill, yes.
The problem is that I see, and I think it's a fundamentally flawed provision in the bill for our democracy, is people can get elected to this body or any of those other positions and have 60% of the people vote against them. I think 50% plus one, that gives voters confidence that that person has the confidence of their district, whatever that district may be. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
I understand that sentiment, and just, you know, this is the process we chose to go with.
Representative Willard, you have your button pushed for the floor. Okay. Representative Willard for the floor. Representative Desatel, why do you rise?
Point of order, I thought she was on her close.
She was on her close, and,
So-
and she did allow for questions.
I know, but
Representative Willard for the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members, I'll be brief. And Madam Chair Emerson, I do appreciate you answering our questions, and I appreciate that discussion. I think to a large extent, the people of Louisiana are still not familiar with this process, and I would even reckon to say that the majority of people in this state don't even know that we're proposing to make this huge change to our elections process. The one thing there's two things that I wanted to touch on really. The first one will really be brief. So I know one of the arguments for making this change is so that our congressional delegation has more time to get premium committee assignments and all of that. But I wanted to take a second to just point out how well Louisiana's congressional delegation is already doing. So before Mike Johnson became Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, we had Congressman Scalise serving as the majority leader. We had Congresswoman Letlow serving on appropriations. We have Congressman Higgins serving as chair of the Homeland Security Subcommittee. And now we have our very own Mike Johnson serving as the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. For a state with 6 congressional members, I think we're doing fantastic when it comes to leadership in Congress. The other thing that I want to mention is, and I know Rep. Emerson and I went back and forth on this, but I really do have concerns that if this were to pass, we would run into a hiccup trying to implement this before an August primary date if we are to pass 2 majority-minority congressional districts. The timing that the Secretary of State's office said they needed to get everything prepared does not factor in an earlier primary date. So that's number 2. Final thing. Look, I know this came out, last week? We found out that this would be one of the items that we would be discussing and debating, and I know that's not a lot of time to reach out to our constituents to get a poll of where they are on it, but we all have seen this poll that speaks for the people of Louisiana, and in that poll, 65% of the people polled strongly support or support our current primary system. 20% don't like it. 20%. If you phrase it a different way and say, should Louisiana go from an open primary to a closed primary, 28% of people support that. 56% oppose that. So those numbers are pretty clear. They're pretty similar, and that's just asking the same question 2 different ways. And the final thing, and this has been brought up a few times during this debate, the final thing that I just want to touch on is that on the question where they say, do you vote or disagree that anyone elected to public office in Louisiana should be elected with at least 50% of the vote, 84% say yes. 84%. So if this bill were to pass, we would be ignoring that. That's 84%. So we would be siding with the 16%. Members, I rise in opposition to this bill, and I hope that you would join me. Thank you.
Representative Emerson, to close on your bill.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I will be brief. Certainly appreciate Representative Willard's comments. He's a great member to work with. And look, there were a lot of polls and discussions brought up in committee, and I think for every poll that says one thing, you have another poll that says another thing. We also saw polls where over 50% of people agreed with this situation and agreed with the party primary process and agreed that only the members of that party should vote in those respective party primaries. So, I certainly understand that situation. I do. But this, I believe, if you're going to go to a party primary process, if you're actually going to have that, then it should be the members of that party who are participating in it. But certainly those parties have the ability to choose whether or not they want unaffiliated voters to participate. Again, we are very unique in our election system, and change is hard, and I know this is a change. But I believe that it is a direction that we need to go in. It's, again, similar to how other states conduct their election process, and I would just ask for your favorable passage. Thank you.
Representative Emerson moves for final passage of the bill. Those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk will open the machine. Vote your machines, members. Are you through voting? Members, are you through voting? Galley, yes. Hilferty, no. Members, are you through voting? The clerk will close the machine. We have 64 yeas, 40 nays, and the bill passes. Representative Emerson moves to adopt the title and moves to reconsider the vote by which the bill finally passed and lay that motion on the table without objection. Co-authors, open the machine for co-authors. Are you through voting? The clerk will close the machine. We have 12 co-authors.